The machine shop at Aberdeen Proving Ground fell silent when Catherine Walsh walked in. It was November 1944, and the men working on America's newest tank weren't used to seeing a woman in coveralls carrying engineering blueprints. "Can I help you, miss?" The foreman's tone was polite but dismissive. "If you're looking for the secretarial pool, that's Building 6. Catherine set her blueprints on the work table. "I'm Catherine Walsh, the new ballistics engineer assigned to the T-26 heavy tank project. I'm here to inspect the gun mounting assembly." The foreman's expression shifted from polite to incredulous. "You're the engineer." "That's what my MIT degree says." Catherine kept her voice level, though she'd had this conversation a dozen times already. At 29, she'd spent 7 years designing artillery systems for the Army. She'd calculated firing solutions that helped win battles in North Africa. She'd redesigned gun sights that saved American lives. But every new assignment started the same way, with men who couldn't believe a woman understood physics and engineering. "Well, I'll be damned." The foreman didn't offer to shake her hand. "I'm Bill Morrison. I run this shop. Didn't know the Army was that desperate for engineers." "They're desperate for good engineers," Catherine replied. "Gender doesn't factor into ballistic calculations." The other men in the shop exchanged glances. A few snickered. Catherine ignored them and moved to examine the tank that dominated the center of the workshop. The T-26, soon to be designated the M26 Pershing, was America's answer to German heavy tanks like the Panther and Tiger. For 3 years, American Sherman tanks had been outgunned and out-armored by German designs. Crews died because their 75 guns couldn't penetrate enemy armor at combat ranges, while German 75 and 88 guns tore through Sherman armor like paper. The Pershing was supposed to change that. It mounted a powerful 90 gun, had thick frontal armor, and weighed 46 tons, a true heavy tank. If it worked, American tankers would finally have a fighting chance against Germany's best. If it worked. Catherine spent the morning inspecting every detail of the gun assembly. She measured tolerances, checked welds, examined the recoil mechanism. The men watched her with a mixture of curiosity and hostility. "She know what she's looking at?" one machinist muttered to another. "Probably just pretending. You know how it is. They give women these jobs to look progressive, but the real work still falls on us." Catherine heard every word but kept working. She'd learned early that arguing was pointless. The only thing that mattered was the work. Do it better than anyone else, and eventually, maybe, they'd respect you. By noon, she'd found 3 problems. The gun mount had excessive play that would affect accuracy. The recoil buffer was installed at the wrong angle, and the ammunition storage racks were positioned where they'd be vulnerable to penetrating hits. She called the foreman over. "These issues need to be corrected before any test firing." Morrison looked at her notes and frowned. "The mounting specs came from Ordnance Department engineers. You saying they're wrong?" "I'm saying the tolerances are outside acceptable parameters for a gun of this size and power. At firing, the vibration will throw off accuracy by several degrees." "Several degrees is nothing at combat range. Several degrees is the difference between a hit and a miss at 1,000 yards, the difference between killing a Panther or getting killed by one." Catherine met his eyes. "Do you want this tank to work or not?" Morrison's jaw tightened. "I'll run it by the project director. Major Hastings makes the final calls, not me." "Then let's go see Major Hastings." Major Robert Hastings was a 45-year-old West Point graduate who'd spent his career in armor development. He looked up from his desk with obvious surprise when Morrison brought Catherine into his office. "Sir, the new engineer has some concerns about the T-26, Morrison said. "She thinks the specs are wrong." "I don't think they're wrong," Catherine corrected. "I've measured them. They're definitively outside acceptable parameters." Hastings studied her for a long moment. "Miss Walsh." "Dr. Walsh, actually. I have a doctorate in mechanical engineering." His eyebrows rose. "Dr. Walsh, the specifications for this tank were developed by some of the best engineers in the country. Are you suggesting they made mistakes?" "I'm suggesting that theoretical designs don't always account for manufacturing tolerances and real-world conditions. The gun mounting as currently installed will compromise accuracy." "Based on what? Your extensive experience with heavy tank design?" His tone was condescending. Based on my extensive experience with large-caliber gun systems, ballistic physics, and 7 years of designing artillery that actually works in combat. Catherine pulled out her calculations. The math doesn't lie, Major. The current configuration will result in unacceptable accuracy degradation. Hastings glanced at her numbers but didn't really examine them. The test firing is scheduled for Thursday. We'll see how it performs then. If there are problems, we'll address them. I'm not going to delay the program based on theoretical concerns from an engineer who just arrived. Sir, if we fire the gun with these issues, we could damage the mounting assembly. That would delay the program far more than fixing it now. That's my decision to make, not yours. Hastings stood, signaling the meeting was over. You're welcome to observe the test firing. Until then, I suggest you familiarize yourself with how we do things here at Aberdeen. Catherine walked out of his office, her face burning with humiliation and anger. Morrison followed her. Don't take it personal, he said. Major's under a lot of pressure. The Army needs this tank operational by spring. Can't afford delays. Can't afford a tank that doesn't work either, Catherine replied. She returned to her small office, really just a desk in a corner of the engineering building, and sat down to think. She'd been brought to Aberdeen specifically because of her expertise in gun systems. But like every assignment before, she was being dismissed because of her gender. The door opened. A young lieutenant poked his head in. Dr. Walsh, I'm Lieutenant James Cooper, assistant to Colonel Morrison. That's the other Morrison, the base commander, not the foreman. He'd like to meet you. Catherine followed Cooper to the administration building. Colonel Thomas Morrison, no relation to Bill Morrison, was a silver-haired officer in his late 50s who greeted her with a firm handshake. Dr. Walsh, welcome to Aberdeen. I apologize for the delayed greeting. I've been in Washington all week. He gestured for her to sit. I wanted to personally welcome you to the team. Your work on the M7 gun sight modifications was outstanding. Saved a lot of lives in Italy. Catherine was so surprised by the genuine praise that she momentarily forgot to respond. Thank you, sir. I know it's not easy being a woman in this field. The Army's still learning how to utilize all its personnel effectively. He leaned forward. But I didn't bring you here to be a token or to file paperwork. I brought you here because the Pershing tank is the most important weapons system we're developing, and you're one of the best ballistics engineers in the country. I need your expertise. I appreciate that, sir. I've already identified several issues with the gun mounting that need correction before. I heard Major Hastings briefed me. Morrison's expression became more serious. He's convinced the concerns are overblown, that you're being overly cautious. Sir, with respect, I'm being accurate. The math is clear. Then help me understand. In terms a old cavalry officer can follow. Catherine pulled out her notes and spent 20 minutes walking the colonel through the technical issues. She explained recoil forces, vibration harmonics, and accuracy tolerances. She showed him calculations and compared them to the measured specs. Morrison listened carefully, asking intelligent questions. Finally, he nodded. This makes sense. The question is, can we fix it before Thursday's test? If we start now, yes. It's a matter of shimming the mount properly and repositioning the buffer. 2 days of work, maybe 3. Morrison picked up his phone. Get me Major Hastings. A pause. Bob, I've reviewed Dr. Walsh's concerns. I want the modifications made before we test fire. Yes, I understand the schedule. I also understand that a failed test will set us back further than 2 days of corrections. Make it happen. He hung up and smiled at Catherine. You'll work with Major Hastings to implement the fixes. He's not happy about it, but he'll cooperate. Thank you, sir. Don't thank me, just make sure this tank works. We've got boys dying in Sherman tanks because they can't match German armor. The Pershing is their lifeline. I need it to be perfect. The weight of that responsibility settled on Catherine's shoulders. This wasn't just about being right or proving herself. This was about American tank crews who would live or die based on whether this gun could penetrate a Panther's armor. I'll make sure it works, sir. Major Hastings was coldly professional when Catherine returned to the workshop. The colonel wants the modifications made. I've authorized Morrison to assign men to assist you. You'll supervise the work. Yes, sir. But understand this, Dr. Walsh. If these changes cause any delays or problems, it's on you. If the gun fails during testing, everyone will know it's because we deviated from the original specs at your insistence. Catherine met his gaze steadily. And if the gun performs perfectly, will everyone know that too? Hastings's expression hardened. Get to work. Over the next 3 days, Catherine worked 18-hour shifts to correct the mounting issues. The machinists and welders assigned to help her were initially resentful. Nobody liked being told to redo work they'd already completed. But as Catherine explained what needed to be done and why, some of them began to understand. Never thought about the harmonics that way, one welder admitted as they repositioned the recoil buffer. Makes sense, though. Gun that size, the vibrations would throw it off. Exactly, Catherine said. It's not about the original design being bad. It's about manufacturing tolerances accumulating in ways that affect performance. By Wednesday evening, the modifications were complete. Catherine ran final measurements and checked everything twice. The gun mount was now within acceptable tolerances. The recoil system was properly aligned. The ammunition racks had been repositioned to a safer location. Thursday morning dawned cold and clear, perfect weather for testing. Catherine arrived at the proving ground range at 0600 hours. The Pershing sat on the firing line, its 9mm gun pointed downrange at a series of targets. The targets weren't ordinary plywood. They were sections of actual German Panther tank armor, captured pieces shipped from Europe specifically for testing. If the Pershing's gun could penetrate Panther armor at combat ranges, it would be a game changer. Major Hastings arrived with a team of observers from the Ordnance Department. He nodded curtly at Catherine but said nothing. Colonel Morrison arrived a few minutes later. Ready, Dr. Walsh? Yes, sir, the gun is properly configured. It should perform well. Should? Will, sir, it will perform well. Morrison smiled. That's what I like to hear. Let's find out. The test crew loaded the Pershing's 9mm gun with an armor-piercing round. Catherine stood in the observation bunker, her heart pounding. Everything she'd calculated, everything she'd corrected, came down to this moment. The gun fired with a thunderous roar that shook the ground. Downrange, the armor-piercing round struck the Panther armor plate at 1,000 yards. The armor shattered. The round punched completely through, leaving a massive hole in the thick German steel. A cheer went up from the observers. They'd been waiting years for an American tank gun that could do that. But Catherine was already analyzing the impact point, comparing it to the aim point. Request permission to check the target, sir. Granted. She drove downrange with Lieutenant Cooper and examined the impact. The round had struck within 2 inches of the aim point at 1,000 yards. Perfect accuracy for a tank gun. It worked, Cooper said, grinning. Your modifications worked. The gun worked, Catherine corrected, but she couldn't help smiling. They fired 12 more rounds that day. Each one punched through Panther armor. Each one struck within acceptable accuracy parameters. The Pershing's 9mm gun was everything they'd hoped for. As the test concluded, Major Hastings approached Catherine. His expression was neutral, but something had shifted in his eyes. The modifications, improved performance, he said stiffly. Good work, Dr. Walsh. It wasn't much, but it was something. Colonel Morrison was more enthusiastic. Outstanding, Dr. Walsh. The Ordnance Department observers were impressed. This data will be crucial for getting the Pershing into production and shipped to Europe. Thank you, sir. There's one more thing. Morrison handed her a folder. We've received intelligence reports about German tank development, new heavy tanks even bigger than the Panther. The Army is already planning the next generation of American armor. I'd like you to lead the ballistics development team. Catherine took the folder, her hands trembling slightly. A leadership position, recognition of her expertise. It was more than she'd dared hope for. I'd be honored, sir. That evening, Catherine sat in her small apartment off base and wrote a letter to her younger sister. She described the successful test, the Panther armor shattering under American fire, and the knowledge that tank crews in Europe would soon have a weapon that could save their lives. But she also wrote about the exhausting battle to be heard, to be respected, to have her expertise valued despite her gender. About the small victory of Major Hastings's grudging acknowledgement. About the larger victory of knowing her work would make a difference. It's not easy, she wrote. Every day is a fight to prove I belong here. But when I see that gun punch through German armor, when I know that American tankers will come home because this weapon works, it's worth it. Every insult, every dismissal, every moment of being underestimated, it's worth it because the work matters more than my pride. She sealed the letter and looked at the folder Colonel Morrison had given her. Inside were intelligence photos of a massive German tank called the King Tiger, with armor even thicker than the Panther. The war wasn't over, the work wasn't done, and Catherine Walsh wasn't finished proving what she could do. Tomorrow, she'd start designing an even better gun. Tonight, she'd allow herself a moment of satisfaction. She'd been right, the gun worked, and nobody could take that away from her. Part 2. The success of the Pershing tests brought Catherine a level of respect she'd never experienced at Aberdeen Proving Ground. Machinists who'd ignored her now asked for her input. Engineers who dismissed her ideas now sought her collaboration. Even Major Hastings treated her with something approaching professional courtesy. But not everyone was pleased with her rising status. Captain Richard Brennan transferred to Aberdeen in December 1944, assigned as the new head of the tank development program. He was 38, a West Point graduate from a military family, and he made his opinion of female engineers clear from his first meeting with the team. "Gentlemen," he began, then glanced at Catherine, "and lady, I'm here to accelerate the Pershing program and begin development of the next generation of American armor. The war in Europe is reaching its critical phase. Our tankers need superior weapons, and they need them fast." He outlined an aggressive schedule: full production of the Pershing by February, preliminary designs for an improved heavy tank by March, prototype testing by summer. After the meeting, Catherine approached him. "Captain Brennan, I'd like to discuss the ballistics requirements for the next generation tank. Colonel Morrison asked me to lead that development." Brennan's smile didn't reach his eyes. "Dr. Walsh, I've reviewed your personnel file. Your work on the Pershing gun mount was competent, but leading development of an entire weapon system requires experience you simply don't have." "Sir, I've designed artillery systems for 7 years. You've made modifications to existing designs. That's valuable work, certainly. But designing a completely new system from scratch requires a different skill set. I'll be bringing in a team of experienced engineers from Detroit to handle the primary development. You'll assist them." Catherine felt her stomach clench. "Colonel Morrison specifically assigned me to lead the team." "Colonel Morrison defers to my judgment on technical matters. I've already discussed this with him." Brennan's tone became patronizing. "You should be pleased, Dr. Walsh. You'll be working with the best minds in the field. A learning opportunity." He walked away before she could respond. Catherine stood alone in the hallway, fury and humiliation warring in her chest. She'd proven herself. She'd earned this assignment, and with one conversation it had been taken away. Lieutenant Cooper found her 10 minutes later, still standing in the same spot. "Dr. Walsh, are you all right? Did you know about this? About Brennan bringing in outside engineers?" Cooper looked uncomfortable. "I heard rumors. I'm sorry. For what it's worth, I think it's wrong. You've earned the right to lead this project." Apparently, Captain Brennan disagrees. Captain Brennan has opinions about women in military service. His wife is very traditional. He's made comments before about women belonging at home, not in uniform or workshops. "Of course he has." Catherine took a deep breath. "Well, I'm not going anywhere. If he wants me to assist his team of experts, I'll assist them, and I'll make sure they know exactly how competent I am." The team from Detroit arrived in January 1945, 5 male engineers from the automotive industry, recruited to apply their expertise to tank design. They were talented, Catherine had to admit, but they were also arrogant and dismissive of military engineers who'd been working on armor for years. And they were especially dismissive of Catherine. "Sweetheart, could you fetch us some coffee?" one of them asked on their first day, barely looking up from the blueprints spread across the conference table. "I'm not a secretary. I'm a ballistics engineer assigned to this project." Catherine kept her voice level. Right. Well, when we need ballistics calculations, we'll let you know. For now, we're working on the overall design concept." Catherine swallowed her anger and studied the blueprints over their shoulders. The design called for a massive tank, nearly 60 tons, with extremely thick armor and a 105 main gun. It would be the most powerful American tank ever built. It would also be a disaster. The weight distribution was wrong. The gun was too heavy for the turret design. The engine wouldn't be able to move that much mass with any reliability, and the ammunition storage was positioned directly under the crew compartment. One penetrating hit, and the entire tank would explode. "These specs are problematic," Catherine said quietly. The lead engineer, a man named Gerald Hoffman, finally looked at her. "In what way?" "The center of gravity is too high. The tank will be unstable on any slope. The gun weight will strain the turret ring beyond its rated capacity, and the ammunition placement is a death trap." Hoffman's expression hardened. "Miss Walsh." "Dr. Walsh." "Dr. Walsh, we've designed vehicles that weigh far more than this tank. We understand weight distribution, structural stress, and mechanical systems. Perhaps you should stick to your area of expertise and let us handle ours." "My area of expertise is weapons systems on armored vehicles. This design is flawed." "Your opinion is noted." Hoffman turned back to his team, effectively dismissing her. Catherine wanted to argue, to force them to listen. But she'd learned that pushing too hard only made men dig in deeper. Instead, she returned to her office and began her own calculations, documenting every flaw in the Detroit team's design. Over the next 3 weeks, she compiled a detailed analysis. She calculated stress loads, projected failure points, modeled the weight distribution, and ran ballistic simulations. Every analysis confirmed her concerns. The design wouldn't work. She brought her findings to Captain Brennan. "Sir, the current design has serious structural and ballistic issues that need to be addressed before we proceed to prototype." Brennan glanced at her report without really reading it. "Hoffman's team has decades of combined experience. They've designed everything from trucks to aircraft. I trust their judgment. But the specific requirements of combat armor are being addressed. Dr. Walsh, I understand you feel overlooked, but this project is too important for personal grievances. I need team players, not prima donnas who can't accept that others might know more than they do." Catherine stared at him. "This isn't about ego, sir. It's about physics. The design is unsafe." "That's your opinion. It's not shared by the experts I brought in to do this job." Brennan stood, signaling the conversation was over. "Unless you have new information, actual data from testing, not just theoretical concerns, I don't want to hear any more complaints about Hoffman's team. Is that clear?" "Yes, sir." Catherine's voice was ice. "Perfectly clear." She returned to her office feeling defeated. No one would listen. Not Brennan, not Hoffman's team, not even Colonel Morrison, who apparently had decided to defer to Brennan's authority. But that evening, something unexpected happened. Bill Morrison, the machine shop foreman, knocked on her office door. "Dr. Walsh, got a minute?" "Of course." Morrison came in and closed the door. "I've been looking at the specs for this new heavy tank, the one Detroit's designing. And I can't make it work. The tolerances they're calling for on the turret ring, we can't manufacture that. Not with our current equipment. Even if we could, it wouldn't hold up under the gun's recoil forces." Catherine felt a surge of hope. "You see the problems too." "I see a design that looks good on paper but won't survive contact with reality." Morrison pulled out his own notes. "I mentioned it to Hoffman. He told me to figure it out. That's what machinists do. But there's no figuring this out. It's fundamentally flawed. I've been telling them that for 3 weeks. Yeah, well, maybe they'll listen if it comes from both of us. I'm just a foreman, but I've been building tanks since 1940. I know what works and what doesn't." Together, they requested a meeting with Captain Brennan and the Detroit team. Brennan agreed reluctantly. "Captain," Morrison began, "we've identified manufacturing issues with the current design that make it impractical to produce." Hoffman interrupted. "Every design has manufacturing challenges. That's why we have engineers to solve problems." "Some problems can't be solved," Catherine said. "The turret ring stress loads exceed material tolerances by 40%. No amount of engineering changes that physics." "We'll use stronger materials," one of the Detroit engineers said dismissively. "Stronger materials that don't exist yet," Catherine pulled out her calculations. "The steel required to handle these loads hasn't been invented. You're designing for fantasy materials, not real ones." "You're being overdramatic," Hoffman said. "Advanced metallurgy isn't advanced enough. Not yet. Maybe in 5 years, but not today. And we need this tank operational this year, not in 1950. The argument grew heated. Morrison backed Catherine's position with hard data about manufacturing limitations. Catherine provided detailed stress analysis, but Hoffman's team remained convinced they were right. Finally, Captain Brennan held up his hand. "Enough, this is getting nowhere." He looked at Catherine and Morrison. "You've made your concerns clear, they're noted in the record, but I'm authorizing the design to move forward to prototype stage. We'll discover any real problems during testing." "Sir, building a prototype with these flaws is a waste of time and resources," Catherine protested. "That's my decision to make, not yours." Dismissed. Catherine walked out of the meeting shaking with frustration. Morrison followed her. "They're going to build it anyway," he said quietly, "even though they know it won't work. Because admitting I'm right would mean admitting they were wrong to dismiss me in the first place," Catherine replied. "And that's unthinkable." "So what do we do?" "We document everything. Every warning we gave, every problem we identified. So when this design fails, and it will fail, the record shows we tried to stop it." But Catherine wasn't content to just wait for failure. That night, she began working on her own design for the heavy tank. If Hoffman's design was doomed, someone needed to have an alternative ready. She worked late into the night every night for 2 weeks. She designed a tank that was heavy but balanced, powerful but practical, well-armored but mobile. She used existing materials and proven manufacturing techniques. Every specification was achievable with current technology. Lieutenant Cooper found her in the workshop at 2 in the morning, surrounded by blueprints and calculations. "Dr. Walsh, you need to sleep. I need to finish this. When Hoffman's design fails, the program will be set back months unless there's an alternative ready to go." Cooper looked at her work. "This is remarkable. Have you shown it to anyone?" "Who would I show it to? Brennan won't look at anything I design. Hoffman's team thinks I'm incompetent. Colonel Morrison has washed his hands of the whole project." "What about the Ordnance Department in Washington? They funded this program. They might be interested in seeing an alternative design." Catherine considered this. Going around Captain Brennan's authority could end her career, but letting a flawed design move forward could cost lives. "I'd need someone to deliver it," she said slowly. "Someone with connections in Washington." Cooper smiled. "My uncle is a colonel in the Ordnance Department. I could get your designs into the right hands, unofficially, of course." "Of course," Catherine gathered her blueprints. "If this backfires, then we both get court-martialed, but at least we tried to do the right thing." Cooper took the designs to Washington the following weekend, using a personal leave day to deliver them to his uncle. Meanwhile, at Aberdeen, work proceeded on Hoffman's prototype. Catherine watched as the machine shop struggled to manufacture parts to impossible specifications. She watched as the turret ring cracked during initial assembly. She watched as the gun mount failed stress testing. She watched as Hoffman's team made modification after modification, each one a tacit admission that the original design was flawed. But no one acknowledged that Catherine had been right. No one apologized for dismissing her concerns. They just quietly fixed the problems she'd identified while pretending they'd discovered them independently. 3 weeks later, Lieutenant Cooper returned from Washington with news. "The Ordnance Department loved your design," he said quietly, meeting her in a secure room where they wouldn't be overheard. "They're sending a review team to Aberdeen next week to evaluate both designs, Hoffman's and yours." Catherine felt her heart race. "Does Captain Brennan know?" "Not yet. The team is coming directly from the Secretary of War's office. Brennan will be notified Monday." Monday arrived. Captain Brennan stormed into Catherine's office at 0800 hours, his face red with fury. "You went over my head. You sent unauthorized designs to Washington." "I sent alternative designs to the Ordnance Department, which funds this program and has the authority to review any proposals." "You undermined my authority and questioned my judgment." "I questioned a flawed design. There's a difference." "You're insubordinate and disloyal. When this review team leaves, I'll be recommending your dismissal from this project, possibly from Aberdeen entirely." "That's your prerogative, sir. But the review team is still coming, and they'll still evaluate both designs based on merit, not politics." Brennan leaned forward, his voice low and threatening. "You've made a powerful enemy, Dr. Walsh. I have friends in Washington. This won't go the way you think." He left, slamming the door behind him. Catherine sat at her desk, her hands shaking. She'd burned her bridges. If her design wasn't selected, her career was over. But she'd done the right thing. She was sure of that. The review team arrived on Wednesday. 4 senior officers and 2 civilian engineers from the Ordnance Department spent 3 days at Aberdeen, examining both designs, reviewing calculations, interviewing team members. Catherine presented her design with quiet confidence, explaining every choice, answering every question, demonstrating that every specification was achievable with current technology. Hoffman presented his design with bluster and bravado, glossing over the problems, promising that manufacturing challenges would be overcome, insisting that his team's experience spoke for itself. On Friday afternoon, the review team delivered their verdict in a meeting attended by Colonel Morrison, Captain Brennan, both design teams and key personnel. Colonel James Patterson from the Ordnance Department stood to present the findings. After careful review of both designs, we've reached a unanimous decision, he began. The Hoffman design is ambitious and incorporates interesting concepts. However, it requires technological capabilities beyond current manufacturing capacity. Production timeline would be 36 months minimum, possibly longer. Hoffman's face went pale. The Walsh design, by contrast, is practical, achievable, and can be put into production within 12 months using existing facilities and materials. More importantly, it addresses all the tactical requirements outlined by combat commanders in Europe. Patterson looked directly at Catherine. Dr. Walsh's design is approved for immediate prototype development. She will serve as lead engineer for the program. The room erupted. Hoffman's team protested. Captain Brennan objected, but Colonel Morrison, who'd been silent throughout the review, stood up. The Ordnance Department has spoken. Dr. Walsh will lead the program. Captain Brennan, you'll provide administrative support, but technical decisions rest with Dr. Walsh. Is that understood? Brennan's jaw clenched. Yes, sir. After the meeting, as people filed out, Colonel Patterson approached Catherine. Dr. Walsh, I want you to know, your design isn't just good, it's exactly what the Army needs. Practical, effective, achievable, that's rare. He smiled. You've got a gift for cutting through the theoretical nonsense and focusing on what actually works. Don't lose that. Thank you, sir. One more thing. Captain Brennan is going to make your life difficult. He's embarrassed, and men like him don't handle embarrassment well. Watch your back. Catherine nodded. She'd expected as much. That night, she allowed herself a moment of celebration. She'd won. Not just the design competition, but something larger. She'd proven that merit mattered more than gender, that being right mattered more than politics, that standing up for what you believed in could actually make a difference. But the fight wasn't over. It was never over. Tomorrow, she'd have to face Captain Brennan's hostility, Hoffman's resentment, and all the other men who couldn't accept that a woman had beaten them. Tomorrow, she'd have to start building her tank and prove that it wasn't just a good design on paper, but a weapon that would save American lives. Tomorrow, the real work began. But tonight, Catherine Walsh allowed herself to feel proud. She'd earned it. Part 3. The prototype development began in February 1945 under conditions of barely concealed hostility. Captain Brennan remained as administrative head of the program, but he made no secret of his resentment. Every requisition Catherine submitted faced delays. Every decision she made was questioned. Every success was minimized. The prototype is 3 days behind schedule, Brennan announced at the weekly progress meeting, his tone accusatory. Dr. Walsh, care to explain why? Catherine kept her voice level. The delay is due to gun barrel delivery from the Watervliet arsenal. They're running behind on all production because of increased demand from Europe. It's not a delay we can control. A competent project manager anticipates delays and builds contingencies into the schedule. I did build in contingencies. 2 weeks of buffer time. We're currently 3 days into that buffer. We're still ahead of the original timeline. Brennan's eyes narrowed. See that you stay that way. These confrontations became routine. Catherine documented everything, every unreasonable demand, every delay Brennan caused, every instance of him taking credit for her work or blaming her for problems outside her control. But she also had allies. Bill Morrison and his machine shop crew worked overtime to keep the prototype on schedule. Lieutenant Cooper ran interference when possible, heading off problems before they reached Catherine. And a few of the engineers who'd initially dismissed her began to respect her technical competence, even if they weren't ready to fully accept a female colleague. The most unexpected ally was Werner Schmidt, a German engineer who'd been captured in North Africa and was now working at Aberdeen as part of a prisoner technical program. Schmidt had designed components for German tanks and was helping American engineers understand enemy armor technology. "Dr. Walsh," he approached her one day in the workshop, his English accented but clear. "I have examined your design drawings. May I offer observation?" Catherine was immediately wary. Accepting technical advice from a German prisoner could be twisted into fraternization or worse. But Schmidt's expertise was genuine, and she needed every advantage. "What's your observation?" "Your armor arrangement on the glacis plate, it is very good. Better than current German designs, but the angle here," he pointed to a junction point. "This creates a shot trap. A round that strikes here will deflect downward into the hull roof, which is thinner armor." Catherine examined the area he'd indicated. He was right. It was a subtle flaw, but a dangerous one. "How would you fix it?" Schmidt sketched a quick modification. "Change the angle by 5 degrees, add a deflector plate here. The shot will bounce away instead of down." Catherine studied his suggestion. It was elegant and simple. "This is good, thank you." Schmidt nodded. "In Germany, I worked with a woman engineer, Greta Hoffman. She designed transmission systems. The men said women cannot understand machines, cannot do engineering. But Greta was better than most of the men, smarter, more careful." His expression became sad. "She died in a bombing raid on the factory. I think she would have liked you." "I'm sorry about your colleague." "War takes everyone, men, women, soldiers, civilians, it does not care." He looked at the tank prototype. "But maybe this machine, maybe it ends the war faster, saves some lives, that is worth something." After he left, Catherine implemented his suggestion. The armor modification would make the tank significantly safer. She noted in her log that the improvement came from consultation with technical advisor Schmidt, but didn't elaborate. Brennan would use it against her if he knew she'd taken advice from a German prisoner. By March, the prototype was taking shape. The hull was assembled. The turret was nearly complete. The gun, a powerful 9mm like the Pershing, but mounted in an improved system that Catherine had designed, was being fitted and calibrated. Then disaster struck. Catherine arrived at the workshop one morning to find the turret ring assembly damaged. Deep gouges scarred the precision machine's surface. The damage was so severe that the entire component would need to be replaced, a setback of at least 3 weeks. "How did this happen?" she demanded. Bill Morrison looked shaken. "I don't know, Doc. We locked up last night like always. Everything was secure. This morning we found it like this." "Could it be accident? A tool dropped, something heavy shifted." "No way, look at the pattern of damage. This was deliberate. Someone took a chisel or a grinder to it." Catherine felt ice in her stomach. Sabotage. Someone had deliberately destroyed critical components of her tank. She reported it immediately to Colonel Morrison. An investigation was launched. MPs questioned everyone with access to the workshop. But the saboteur had been careful. No witnesses, no fingerprints, no evidence. Captain Brennan made a show of concern. "This is terrible, such a setback to the program. Dr. Walsh, do you have any idea who might have done this?" "No, sir." "Perhaps someone who disagreed with your design, or felt that a woman shouldn't be leading this project." His expression was sympathetic, but his eyes were cold. "It's unfortunate, but this is a male-dominated field. Some men have strong feelings about that." Catherine understood the implication. He was suggesting she'd been targeted because of her gender, while simultaneously implying that maybe she deserved it for pushing into a man's world. "Or perhaps," she said carefully, "someone who wanted to delay the program for other reasons." "What reasons would those be?" "I couldn't say, sir." The investigation went nowhere. The damaged components were replaced, but it took 4 weeks instead of 3 because supply chains were stretched thin. Brennan made sure everyone knew the program was now behind schedule and whose fault it was. Catherine worked longer hours, pushed her team harder, and slowly clawed back the lost time. By late April, the prototype was ready for initial testing. But the night before the first test, Catherine received a threatening note slipped under her office door. "Women who don't know their place get hurt. Stop now before something worse happens." This is your only warning." She showed the note to Lieutenant Cooper. "Should I report this?" "To who, Brennan? You think he'll help?" Cooper looked troubled. "Whoever's doing this has access to the base, knows your schedule, and isn't afraid to make threats. That's scary." "I'm not stopping, I can't." "I know, but be careful, vary your routine, don't work alone late at night, and maybe keep this." He handed her a small pistol, just in case. Catherine had never carried a weapon besides her service sidearm, and she'd never fired that outside of qualification range. But she took the pistol and kept it in her desk drawer. The first round of testing went perfectly. The tank's mobility, armor protection, and gun performance all met or exceeded specifications. The Ordnance Department observers were impressed. Colonel Morrison was pleased. Even Captain Brennan couldn't find fault, though he tried. But someone wasn't happy. 2 days after the successful test, Catherine was working late in her office when she heard footsteps in the hallway. Heavy boots, moving slowly, deliberately. She'd sent everyone home hours ago. She should have been alone in the building. The footsteps stopped outside her door. The doorknob turned slowly. Catherine's hand moved to her desk drawer, to the pistol Cooper had given her. The door opened. A figure in dark clothes and a pulled-down cap stepped inside. "Who's there?" Catherine's voice was steady despite her racing heart. The figure moved toward her desk. Catherine pulled out the pistol. "Stop right there." The figure lunged. Catherine fired. The shot went wild, punching through the wall, but the sound was enough. The intruder ran, crashing through the door and disappearing down the hallway. Catherine chased him, but he was faster. By the time she reached the exit, he was gone into the darkness. MPs arrived within minutes, responding to the gunshot. Catherine gave her statement. A search of the building found nothing except signs of forced entry through a rear window. This time, Colonel Morrison took the threat seriously. "You'll have a guard posted outside your office and quarters. I'm also assigning Sergeant Davis as your personal security escort." "Sir, that seems excessive." "Someone just tried to attack you, Dr. Walsh, in a military facility. This is beyond professional rivalry. This is criminal." His expression was grim. "I'm also requesting CID Criminal Investigation Division to take over the case. Something isn't right here." The CID agents arrived the next day. They interviewed Catherine, examined the evidence, and began their own investigation. Within a week, they'd uncovered something Catherine hadn't expected. Agent Williams called her to a secure meeting room. "Dr. Walsh, we've been looking into the sabotage and the attack on you. We found some interesting connections." "What kind of connections?" "Captain Brennan has significant gambling debts, over $20,000 owed to individuals in Baltimore. He's been making payments but barely keeping ahead of the interest." Williams pulled out a file. "We also found that he's been in contact with someone named Victor Kaufman, an industrialist who owns several manufacturing plants." "What does this have to do with the sabotage?" "Kaufman owns the company that employs Gerald Hoffman, the engineer whose design you beat. Kaufman had a contract lined up to produce Hoffman's heavy tank. When your design was selected instead, he lost a lucrative government contract worth millions." Catherine felt the pieces clicking together, and Brennan needed money to pay his gambling debts. "We believe Kaufman approached Brennan with an offer. Sabotage your program, discredit you, get your design canceled. In return, Kaufman would pay off Brennan's debts and give him a job at his company after the war." "Can you prove this?" "We're working on it. We need more evidence before we can make arrests. That's where you come in." Williams outlined a plan. Catherine would continue working on the prototype, but CID would monitor her closely. They'd set up surveillance on Brennan and watch for him to make contact with Kaufman or attempt more sabotage. "You'd be bait," Williams said bluntly. "There's risk involved." "I've been bait this whole time," Catherine replied. "At least now I know who the predator is." Over the next 2 weeks, Catherine worked under constant CID surveillance. She pretended not to know about the investigation. She interacted with Brennan normally, even as she watched for signs of his guilt. The breakthrough came when Brennan received a telegram from Baltimore. CID intercepted and copied it. The message was coded, but CID's cryptographers broke it quickly. "Prototype must fail at final test. Use Compound 7 on hydraulic seals, payment on completion." Compound 7 was a chemical that would degrade rubber seals without immediate visible damage. If applied to the tank's hydraulic systems, the seals would fail during high-stress testing, making it look like a design flaw rather than sabotage. CID set up their trap. They monitored the prototype around the clock. And 3 nights before the final test, they caught Captain Brennan in the workshop at 0200 hours, applying chemical compound to the hydraulic seals. He was arrested immediately, faced with overwhelming evidence: the intercepted telegram, the chemical compound, testimony from his bookie about the debts, and recorded phone conversations with Kaufman. Brennan confessed to everything. The sabotage, the threats. He even confessed to hearing someone to attack Catherine in her office. Victor Kaufman was arrested in Baltimore. Gerald Hoffman, who'd known about and encouraged the sabotage, was charged as an accessory. The scandal rocked Aberdeen, proving ground and sent shockwaves through the Ordnance Department. Colonel Morrison called Catherine to his office. "I owe you an apology. I should have seen what Brennan was doing. I should have protected you better." "You couldn't have known, sir. I should have trusted my instincts. I knew something was wrong, but I let politics and hierarchy override my judgment." He looked at her seriously. "You've been through hell on this project, Dr. Walsh. If you want to transfer to another assignment, I'll make it happen. No questions asked." Catherine considered this, an easier path, a fresh start somewhere people didn't know about the sabotage and the scandal. But she'd come too far to quit now. "I want to finish the project, sir. I want to see this tank through to production. I owe that to the crews who'll use it in combat." Morrison smiled. "I was hoping you'd say that. The final test is in 3 days. Let's show them what you've built." The hydraulic seals were replaced with untainted components. Every system was rechecked and verified. On the day of the final test, Catherine stood at the proving ground with Colonel Morrison, the Ordnance Department observers, and the CID agents who'd helped catch Brennan. The tank performed flawlessly. It maneuvered through rough terrain at speed. It fired the 9mm gun with devastating accuracy. It took simulated hits from German anti-tank weapons, and the crew remained safe behind its armor. When the test concluded, the head of the Ordnance Department evaluation team shook Catherine's hand. "Dr. Walsh, this is the finest tank design I've seen. Practical, effective, and ready for production. The Army is authorizing immediate manufacturing. With luck, we'll have units in Europe by summer." "Thank you, sir." But the real validation came that evening. Bill Morrison and the machine shop crew threw an impromptu celebration in the workshop. They'd built a cake, poorly decorated but heartfelt, that read, "Congratulations, Doc Walsh." "Speech," someone called out. Catherine stood on a workbench so everyone could see her. "I can't take credit for this tank. Every person in this room contributed. You built it. You solved problems. You made it work. I just drew the blueprints." "Best blueprints we ever worked from," Morrison called out. "And the only ones that came from someone who listens to the people doing the actual building." The crew cheered. Catherine felt tears sting her eyes but blinked them back. Later, as she walked across the base to her quarters, Lieutenant Cooper fell in step beside her. "You did it," he said. "You beat them all. The sabotage, Brennan, the doubters. You actually did it." "We did it," Catherine corrected. "I couldn't have done this alone." "Maybe, but you led the way. You showed everyone that competence and determination matter more than gender or politics or who you know." He smiled. "You changed things here, Dr. Walsh, for the better." Catherine looked up at the stars. Somewhere in Europe, American tank crews were fighting and dying in Shermans that couldn't match German armor. But soon, very soon, they'd have her tank. The tank that could punch through a Panther's armor. The tank that would give them a fighting chance. "I hope it was worth it," she said quietly. "It was, trust me, it was." Part 4. The heavy tank that Catherine Walsh designed entered production in June 1945 under the designation M26A1. It was too late to see significant action in Europe. Germany surrendered in May. But the design became the foundation for American armor development for the next decade. More importantly, it proved that the 9mm gun could defeat even the heaviest German armor. Reports filtered back from Europe about the handful of M26 Pershings that had seen combat in the war's final weeks. In one engagement near Cologne, a Pershing faced a German Panther tank at close range. The Panther crew, veterans of the Eastern Front, were confident. Their tank had frontal armor that could deflect most American guns. They destroyed dozens of Shermans. This should have been no different. But when the Pershing's 9mm gun fired, the armor-piercing round punched completely through the Panther's glacis plate at 800 yards. The German crew barely had time to react before their tank was destroyed. Surviving crew members captured afterward were stunned. "We were told American tanks were weak," one said through a translator. "That our armor was invincible. We did not know you had built something that could match our Panthers." Catherine read that intelligence report in her office at Aberdeen and felt a complex mixture of pride and sorrow. Pride that her work had helped even the odds for American tankers. Sorrow that it had come too late for so many who died in inferior tanks. But the war wasn't over. Japan still fought on, and the army was already planning for the invasion of the Japanese home islands. Catherine's tank design was being modified for Pacific conditions, improved cooling systems for jungle heat, better ammunition storage for naval transport. She was working on these modifications when Colonel Morrison called her to his office in July. "Dr. Walsh, I have news. The War Department is creating a new position, Director of Armored Vehicle Development. It's a civilian GS-14 position, equivalent to a colonel's rank. They're offering it to you." Catherine sat down slowly. That's a significant promotion. It's recognition of what you've accomplished. You'd be based in Washington, coordinating tank development across all branches. It's the highest technical position in Army armor development. "What about my work here?" "The M26A1 is in production. The Pacific modifications can be handled by the team you've trained. You've built something that will last beyond any single project." Morrison smiled. "It's time for you to move up, Dr. Walsh. Time for you to influence the entire armor program, not just individual tanks." Catherine thought about it. More responsibility, more authority, a chance to shape the future of American armor development. But also more politics, more fighting for respect, more men who'd resent taking orders from a woman. "Can I think about it?" Of course, they need an answer by the end of the month. That evening, Catherine drove into the Maryland countryside thinking she'd fought so hard to get here, proven herself again and again, survived sabotage, threats, and professional destruction attempts. Was she ready to do it all over again in Washington? She stopped at a small diner for coffee. The radio was playing news. The war in the Pacific continued, but there were rumors of a new weapon that might end it quickly. Catherine listened while watching other patrons. Families, couples, people living ordinary lives while others fought overseas. A young woman, maybe 22, sat alone in a booth reading a newspaper article about women in the workforce. She noticed Catherine's Aberdeen Proving Ground identification badge. "Excuse me, do you work at the Army base?" "Yes, I'm an engineer there." The young woman's eyes lit up. "Really? I'm studying engineering at the University of Maryland. I want to design airplanes, but my advisor says it's not realistic for a woman, that I should consider teaching instead." Catherine looked at this young woman, eager, hopeful, facing the same barriers Catherine had faced a decade ago, and made her decision. "Don't listen to him. If you want to design airplanes, study hard, prove you're the best, and don't let anyone tell you that you can't. The world is changing. We're making it change." The young woman smiled. "Thank you, that means a lot." After she left, Catherine sat alone with her coffee and thought about legacy, about the women who'd come after her, about whether she could do more good fighting battles in Washington or staying at Aberdeen training the next generation. She realized the answer was both. She'd take the Washington job, but she'd also mentor young engineers like that woman in the diner. She'd fight to open doors that had been closed. She'd use her new authority to create opportunities for others. Catherine accepted the position the next day. Her last week at Aberdeen was a whirlwind of farewell meetings, knowledge transfer sessions, and final reviews of ongoing projects. On her final day, the base held a formal ceremony. Colonel Morrison presented her with the Army's Meritorious Civilian Service Award, the highest honor given to civilian employees. The citation read, "For exceptional technical expertise, unwavering dedication, and extraordinary courage in the development of armored vehicles that have saved countless American lives." Werner Schmidt, the German engineer who'd helped her fix the armor flaw, approached her after the ceremony. He'd been cleared for repatriation and would be leaving soon. "Dr. Walsh, I wanted to say goodbye and to thank you." "Thank me for what?" for treating me as an engineer, not as an enemy, for listening to my ideas, for showing me that competence transcends nationality or gender or politics." He smiled sadly. "I will return to Germany soon. I do not know what I will find there, but I will remember that here in America I met people who valued ideas over identity. That gives me hope." "Good luck, Werner. Help rebuild your country into something better." "I will try, as you have rebuilt respect for women in your field. We are both engineers, yes. We build things, sometimes machines, sometimes futures." Catherine moved to Washington in August 1945. Her new office was in the War Department building, a massive structure filled with thousands of personnel managing the final stages of the war. On August 15th, Japan surrendered. The war was over. Catherine stood with thousands of others outside the White House celebrating, but her mind was already on the future. Peacetime would mean massive military drawdown, projects canceled, personnel released. Women especially would be pushed out, told to go home and give jobs back to returning servicemen. Catherine had to work fast to secure the gains that women had made during the war. She spent the next year fighting bureaucratic battles more challenging than any engineering problem. She argued for retaining female engineers. She pushed for equal pay standards. She created mentorship programs. She used her position to open doors for women in fields that had been exclusively male. It wasn't easy. For every victory, there were a dozen setbacks, but gradually progress was made. In 1947, Catherine received a letter that made everything worthwhile. It was from the young woman she'd met in the diner. "Dear Dr. Walsh, you may not remember me, but we met briefly 2 years ago. You encouraged me to pursue engineering despite my advisor's discouragement. I wanted you to know, I graduated last month with highest honors in mechanical engineering. I've accepted a position with Boeing in Seattle designing aircraft structures." When I told my advisor, he was shocked. He said he'd never thought a woman would actually succeed in the field. I told him that women have been succeeding all along, people just haven't been paying attention. "Thank you for showing me it was possible. Thank you for being the proof. Sincerely, Janet Morrison." Catherine kept that letter on her desk. On hard days, and there were many hard days, she'd read it and remember why she fought these battles. In 1950, when North Korea invaded South Korea, Catherine's tank designs went back to war. The M26 and its improved variants faced Soviet-designed T-34 tanks. The 9mm gun she'd helped perfect gave American tankers the firepower they needed. Intelligence reports from Korea described North Korean tank crews who were stunned when American tanks punched through their armor at ranges they'd thought safe, just like the German Panther crews had been stunned in 1945. Catherine read those reports and felt the familiar mix of pride and sorrow. Her work saved lives, but war itself remained a tragedy. By 1955, Catherine had been director of armored vehicle development for 10 years. She'd overseen the development of multiple tank designs, trained hundreds of engineers, and fundamentally changed how the Army approached armor development. She'd also faced 1,000 battles over her gender, senators who questioned whether a woman should hold such authority, generals who tried to override her technical decisions, contractors who assumed she was a secretary until she corrected them. The fight never ended. But neither did the progress. One afternoon, she was reviewing proposals for next-generation tank designs when her secretary buzzed her. "Dr. Walsh, there's a gentleman here to see you. He says his name is Werner Schmidt and that you knew him at Aberdeen." Catherine was surprised. "Send him in." Werner looked older. He'd be in his late 50s now, but his expression was warm. They shook hands. "Werner, this is unexpected. What brings you to Washington?" "I am here with a technical delegation from West Germany. We are consulting with your government on NATO armor standards." He smiled. "When I learned you were in this building, I had to visit, to see if the woman who designed tanks better than the men was still fighting the good fight." "Still fighting? Some days I'm not sure I'm winning, but I'm fighting." "You are winning. Do you know how I know?" He pulled out a newspaper, a German publication. The headline was about a new tank being developed by the Bundeswehr, the new West German army. "This tank's design team includes 3 women engineers in Germany in 1955. That was unthinkable 10 years ago. Because of the war. Because of you, your work became known in Europe. Women in Germany and France and Britain saw that an American woman could design tanks that defeated German armor. It inspired them, opened doors. Werner's expression was serious. You changed more than tank design, Dr. Walsh. You changed what people believed was possible. After he left, Catherine stood at her window looking out over Washington, the city where laws were made, where wars were planned, where the future took shape. She thought about the long road from that first day at Aberdeen, when Bill Morrison had assumed she was lost and looking for the secretarial pool. She thought about every insult, every dismissal, every moment of being underestimated. She thought about the sabotage, the threats, the attack in her office, the battles that had nothing to do with engineering and everything to do with men who couldn't accept that a woman might be smarter than them. She thought about the victories, too, the Pershing's gun punching through Panther armor, the successful tests, the production tanks that had saved American lives.